Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm of Abercrombie & Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Samuel Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It is not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast.
Good morning. Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. With us today is our special guest, Shasta Kahoalii. Did I pronounce that right?
You got it right.
All right. And why did we bring Shasta on? Shasta is a professional in the area of employee recruiting, hiring, and she's got a wealth of knowledge in this area. And our topic for today, kind of as we discussed, is career planning after a divorce or separation. So what kinds of things do you need to be looking for? What kinds of things are going to help you land that job if you've got to get back out in the workforce? Shasta, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me today. I, first and foremost, am a wife. I'm a mom of two crazy kids. I have been a child of divorce, and I've also been divorced. So I feel where you guys are coming from. I have worked for the same organization for the last almost 13 years, the Fortune 50 company. The first part of those 13 years, I was in HR and a people leader, and then the last 7 years, I've been part of the recruiting organization. I recruit executives for our company at all levels, and gosh, over the last 13 years, have interviewed thousands and hired hundreds. So I'm really excited to be here today.
We really appreciate it. And the big question that we have, that we've been getting from a lot of clients, especially to moms who've been kind of out of the workforce, they're at home raising kids. Obviously that's one of the most important jobs, if not the most important job. It's definitely harder than going to a 9-to-5 every day. But one of the big questions we're getting is that the fact scenario is kind of like this: husband and wife get divorced. Wife has been a stay-at-home mom for a number of years, and it varies. A lot of times it's 10 plus, sometimes it's under 10. It really just depends on the situation. Now wife has to get back into the workforce. And a lot of times these women are pretty well educated, and a lot of them have college degrees. Some of them have master's degrees, and some don't. But there's that gap in the resume, and then they got to get back out in the workforce. And I guess the situation could also apply to a stay-at-home dad as well. But with that gap in the resume, how does the person, let's call it the wife, how does the wife get out and find that great job?
Yeah, how do they answer? So, I think as I think about first steps, it's important to know what you want to do. I think that's important to talk about, is kind of sitting down and thinking about what, if you have a professional degree that's very segmented and, physical hygiene or something like that, or teaching, then you have a direction to go. But if you don't, and it's been pretty general, I think it's important to sit down and think about what it is that you want to do next, or what are you open to doing, the hours that you're willing to work, how much you need to make it work, where it needs to be. And so once you kind of have that idea of what's next, then it's really creating and building a resume around that. It's really important, and I think we'll get later on into this talk about specific things about resumes that you need to do. Following that, I would suggest really from a social media standpoint, making sure that you have a professional presence on LinkedIn. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, don't let it intimidate you. It's incredibly user-friendly. Take a minute, Google how to set up a LinkedIn profile. The whole thing should take you maybe an hour. Take the picture that represents you. It doesn't have to be a professional headshot. It should be one that represents you that is at least professional, though, in terms of what's pictured around you.
So as a hiring professional, are you looking at that? Are you going to that LinkedIn? Are you looking at it?
Yeah.
Are you checking that out and seeing what the skill set is, what the background is, what the education is, who the connections are?
And if there's a gap in the resume, one of the things I'm looking for then is some sort of clue to watch. So if it's on LinkedIn, if it's a cover letter, one of the things I would recommend if you've taken a significant amount of time out of the workforce, you don't need to put it on the resume, but there should be a cover letter accompanying it. Or it should be somewhere on LinkedIn where a recruiter can really figure out, kind of what's the reason and why do you want to come back and what is it looking for.
Do you find that people that are getting back in the workforce, I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer or anything, but getting back in the workforce, do you find that people are having difficulty getting back in, or is it more of a struggle? How does that look versus, competing with somebody who's just had a job for 10 years?
I think it's about how you market yourself. So I would hire someone who's been out for 10 years if they are able to present themselves in a way that makes sense for the job that I have. And so, but I really think it's about the entire package, from the resume to how you interview to your social media presence and what that looks like. All of that's important. So I don't want anyone to get discouraged, because I think everyone has an equal shot in a way, depending on, certifications are up to date, those sorts of things that you might need for the job or the career. But it really is about preparation before you even get to that recruiter.
I mean, for a lot of people, I know, like Sam and I, for example, I mean, when we got our job at our last corporate job, there was no Facebook, there was no LinkedIn. It was your resume, it was who you knew at the place, it was, all of the connections, stuff like that. So it sometimes if you're a mom and you've had a child and things like that, you could be out for a while, and the technology has changed, the workforce has changed in terms of how people are marketing themselves. So, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I think LinkedIn is one of the most powerful professional networks out there. Most people who are a professional in some capacity will have one, and always worry about where they've gone to school, what sort of affiliations they've had, what sort of companies that they follow. You can pick companies to follow, you can pick groups to be in on there, but it tells some sort of story. There's a place for a bio. So if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, I would start there along with your resume. MySpace, I think, around when I joined my company. That's clearly not there anymore. Facebook is there. One of the questions that I got was, do employers look at those things, the Facebook, the Instagram, the Twitter, even the Pinterest? I think it depends on the organization and what their policy is. Some of them definitely do. And so I would also Google results and see what comes up. And if anything is, professionally damaging to someone who would hire you, then I would do that as well.
Yeah. So just using the example of our job that we had, our company was very, very straight laced. And when we started working there was no facial hair. It was quite different than it is today. But they checked out Facebook pages of everybody that applied for a job there. And yes, if there was, keg stands and jet skis in the pool and whatever else on.
If it looked like a rap video, Shasta, we probably didn't hire them.
Because we're talking about selling a really professional image to our clients and things like that. So, that obviously makes a difference. And I guess that depends on the type of company that you're going for. This mom that's going out to get this job, what types of things should she consider in terms of like location of job, flexibility, pay benefits? What is she, we're talking about somebody who may be out of the workforce for a while and needs to get back in, and it's basically maybe starting kind of from ground zero. Maybe the pay scale was even different when they went out. So
I think it's important to be realistic about what you're qualified for. That is first, how I would start that conversation. And that isn't something that you should have to figure out on your own. You have a network of friends and family. So start talking to them about, what it is that you want to do, what sort of certifications, what did you do before? If you didn't do anything before, then what other opportunities out there, depending on the time of the year. Is it retail? Is it an administration job? What type of hours do you need? And so it really should take you some time to really dig in and understand what you're actually qualified for based on kind of the criteria you have. Talk to your friends and family around you, and then come up with your set of parameters in terms of, here's what I'm looking for, here's what I want, here's where I won't go below, here's how much I need to live on. And then do some research, and again, with the Google, Glassdoor is a great place to go in terms of how much those jobs pay. What does that look like, so that you come in armed, I think, to when you're applying to companies and when you get in front of a recruiter, you will get the question, how much do you?
So looking at, Oh, I'm sorry, Sam.
I was just gonna follow that up. So, I mean, I've heard a lot about what they call targeting application or targeted applications. So, like where you've really kind of tailored both your resume, your approach to a specific position. Is that something that you would recommend as an individual who's like trying to re-enter the workforce, that they do some research and really kind of make sure that whatever it is that they're going to try to chase down, it really is kind of built around that type of a role? Or would you say just kind of overall generic is a better way to go?
So I think I would recommend both. And here's why. Your resume tells a story. At the end of the day, you're not going to get, if you don't have the opportunity to talk to someone, that resume, that cover letter, that LinkedIn bio is telling your story for you. And so it's important to know if you're going for a very segmented job, I used dental hygienist before, but maybe it's paralegal and you have the certifications and you've got to remove those sorts of things in your objective in the resume, then yeah, you should list that. And then if you build your resume, you're thinking about what kind of qualifications have I had that this individual, while I might not have been working, and maybe I had volunteer experience that was relevant, that showed some sort of leadership capacity or some sort of capacity to connect with people. Maybe you did something from a volunteer organization that is relevant if you think about those skills that it took. And so you're listing those sorts of things out. And so that is a very segmented, targeted resume because you're going for a very specific job. However, I will tell you that as you think about, maybe being open to other things, so someone who, could be a hygienist, but is also open to a marketing job or to an admin job, you need to have a resume that is much more broad. Because I will say, as a recruiter, I read all of the objectives. It takes 2 seconds, and I normally make a decision, especially if it's someone who's completely outside of who I would normally hire, but has some of the criteria in terms of leadership that I'm looking for. I always read, well, what kind of job are they looking for? And if they haven't changed that, and it's something completely different than what I'm hiring for, I'm probably not going to reach out, because in my mind, then as the recruiter, I'm thinking, this isn't the job they want. They're just trying to look for something, for that one snack. So I think it is important that you build that resume to consider that. You either have one broad one that applies to everything, or one that is more segmented towards and maybe that specialty role that you're looking for, and a broad one if you're open to more things.
So when you go to look for the job, I think we had touched on this before. I mean, everyone's talking about Indeed. What are some of the places that people go to look? I mean, back in the day it was Monster and some of those, it's still around. Where am I going to look for this job? Where is this our fictitious female that's very real to life? Where does she go to look for this job?
I think there's a couple things. I would first say, if you are getting ready to look for a job and going into the workforce, if you look for a job like a full-time job, so the amount of hours that you are able to dedicate towards working, plan to spend that time and get organized. I encourage those that I've worked with personally, create an Excel grid of all of the companies that you've applied for, what position you've applied for, where you found that position, anything you've learned about that position, so that if you do get reached out to, that you are very prepared for what it is time you got there. Because every company that talks to you wants to feel like they're special, that you also want to be a part of this. I think being organized is important. And so then you think about, okay, where am I going to find jobs? Indeed is the #1 search engine in the country. You definitely want to have a resume posted there. You can also see different jobs. A lot of times it will take you to the company's website to apply there directly, or you can apply through Indeed, depending on the capabilities of the company. But that's where I would start. The second thing, though, I would say, and in my experience, especially those that I've helped personally in their lives, it's all about who you know in the networking. And it doesn't have to be your best friend that gets you the job, but maybe it's your best friend's husband, coworker's wife, who knows somebody. And so, one of the things that I think is incredibly important in where you're at is being vulnerable and asking for help, and really being able to express what it is you need help with, whether it's forwarding a resume. And so you're on LinkedIn and you've made a bunch of connections, and you realize that the mom from PCA's husband works at company XYZ, and you found a great job at XYZ, and even though he's not in that department, it takes 2 seconds to say, hey, here's where I'm at. I don't know, would you be willing to ask your husband to forward the resume to the recruiter? I will tell you, as a recruiter, I will look at every resume that was forwarded to me by someone in the company. They might not be qualified, and I'll always reach back and talk about why, but I'll always take a look at them. And that's half the battle of getting to the even more of your resume.
So getting yourself a networking tree is crucial.
I think it's you sit down and you brainstorm everyone you know and how you know them and where they're connected. And then once you're on LinkedIn, the great thing is start connecting with them and you can see who else is in their network and start connecting with them as well.
What about, kind of more of niche websites like Hire My Mom or some of those? Are those?
I personally don't recruit from them. I think if you have time to do it, it's worth it. But I will tell you the value is in your own personal network and building that brand, as well as bigger opportunities like these.
Well, Bryan,
go ahead.
I was just going to tell you, one of the examples I think that kind of falls along in line with what we're talking about is, I thought it was pretty strange when it happened, but now having this conversation, I think it was pretty brilliant. There was a gentleman that we were really good friends. We've been friends for years. And he said, hey, we're going to have this huge barbecue and it's my wife re-entering the workforce barbecue. And so what he did, he invited a whole bunch of his friends. Came over as couples and the whole thing was just networking. She just got to sit there and talk to people about, hey, here's what I've been doing. Here's why I want to get back into the workforce. If you know anything that's good that's out there. And it ended up leading her to the job that she's currently in, which she loves. So it was, now that I think about that, that's actually a really unique way to just kind of really bring that networking group that we're talking about, these connections, these, relationships, and trying to put them in play for you just as a positive way going forward.
So when you're actually setting up the resume, and I know we touched on that, do you have any kind of tips for like what you put in the resume, what you highlight,
So, I talked about the career objective being important, especially as, you think about maybe one that's more segmented, one that's more broad. Spelling mistakes, you would not believe how many grammar and spelling mistakes that I've seen. And so, don't be the only one who puts your resume. It doesn't need to be a professional that you pay, but you have and family members, I'm sure, who are willing to take a look at it.
But your kiddo's English teacher, right?
Some of them that are in a professional capacity that hire people. And so I think that's really important and that says a lot. And then I think, I've seen some resumes where people have been out of the workforce or have only worked for a certain amount of years that are 5 pages long. I will tell you that I don't look at a 5-page resume. You give me maybe the 2 pages. And so I think about brevity is important. You don't want to be so brief that you have half a page of a resume, but you do want to make sure that you keep it brief. And then I think about, putting more relevant information. So if you maybe only have one job and then you got married, what else have you done though? How else have you contributed to your community? And make sure it's the first thing on there. And then it kind of goes hand in hand with the resume. I already covered this, but a cover letter I think is really important when you are re-entering the workforce. And you don't have to overshare, but I think it's important to at least mention what it is that you're looking for and why you're looking to re-enter in some sort of capacity. It doesn't even have to talk about divorce or separation, but maybe my personal situation has changed. I've spent the last 5 years at home with my kids, and now I'm looking to come back. That's okay.
So let's talk about that. We live here in the Woodlands area where there's a lot of stay-at-home moms, and they're not just at Starbucks or at the gym or things like that. You're talking about a lot of highly successful professional women who do amazing things for charitable organizations. They do they're room moms, they're PTO presidents. They're doing all of these different things.
Bryan, I think you meant PTA. I think you meant PTA. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. That changed. That's right.
I think it's PTO now. But no, they're baseball moms. They're they're team moms. How do they make that kind of stuff? Because we have a friend that works for this charity, and she does all this marketing and stuff for this charity. It's all volunteer, but literally that's a full-time job. She's got probably more marketing experience doing that charity than most people have in their regular job.
I'd say read it like you were getting paid. So it could be, such and such organization, and in parentheses it could say volunteer. If there's a lot of volunteer work, it could say volunteer work and list it. But read it like you would a resume. So it's led endeavors in this, reached out to these companies for marketing, increase, contributions by 20%, whatever it is, think about those things that you're really proud of during that time and experience, and those are the things you want to list out, regardless of whether you were getting paid or not getting paid.
Because just organizing like my son and daughter's school carnival is probably a humongous job that would set you up to probably be some kind of event planner or something like that would, that you could actually get paid for.
Yeah.
Shasta? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think at the end of this, we're going to share maybe some question stories, and I have one just like that. And so we'll get into that further, but that was my sister.
Okay.
So have you ever, I know we were talking a little bit about resumes and cover letters and how important that cover letter can be. Have you received any? I've heard my son went to the University of Texas, recently graduated, and one of the things that they were talking about considering like reaching certain employers was a video cover letter. So like attaching a small video that's basically like they get to see you, they get to hear you, get to kind of hear your voice, explain what's going on and who you are, and then attach it to, you know, whatever resume that they're submitting. Is that something you've experienced or?
Okay, this is totally thing. Yeah, I mean, it definitely, if we think about this generation, is one of the things, you know, we even talked about reaching this generation with video messages and text messages and those sorts of things. I would say it depends on the company. So if you think about cybersecurity right now, I'll tell you, I wouldn't open a video message from anyone unless I knew who it was coming from. So I think that is a piece of it that you do have to be really careful about, is you put all this work into it and that's the only thing that you're doing to try to get your foot in the door.
But would you subscribe to someone's YouTube channel? No, I'm just kidding. If they put it on their YouTube channel, would you subscribe to that or their TikTok?
Probably not, no. So I think it has relevance depending on the type of organization. So if you're trying to get into an organization that is targeting, you know, that group of millennials and, you know, younger folks, and that is, you know, that it's a marketing company, and yeah, that might work. So I think it's learn, you know, research and know more about the company as well that you're trying to get into.
Do you recommend that people who've been out of the workforce for a time, do you recommend that they get any more training? Or, I mean, sometimes that's probably very, you know, industry specific in terms of what they're trying to do, but what do you recommend that people do just basically? Do they need to go take a typing class, or do they need to, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they even give typing
or join like professional organizations, something that, you know, like maybe kind of opens up that network. Is that something you would tell them to do?
So I would tell them if it opens up your network, absolutely. But you probably already have a big network unless you stay at home and don't talk to anyone. You can have first because they know you. In terms of additional training, I think it's the job that you're going for. You know, if you have a degree and you're looking for something to get by, you know, and you want to substitute, I think there's certification you have to get to do that. You know, so those are things that you need to look at in terms of what types of training you would need, or renewing a certification which you would need for something. But I wouldn't recommend right off the bat spending a ton of money. You know, if you're looking or you think you need help and you've been looking for a while, invest in a job coach or someone who's willing to, you know, spend some time reviewing resumes and doing interview prep.
So let's talk a little bit about maybe the side that nobody wants to talk about. You know, is there an ugly side to all of this? Is there something that people need to kind of watch out for when they're getting back in the workforce? Is there, you know, I don't know. I mean, just kind of an undercurrent of bias for saying, okay, well, this person's got kids, so they're not going to devote all their time to my company, or, you know, kind of that kind of thing. Is there stuff that you know, the potential you know, employee has to watch out for?
I would say hopefully not, but I'm sure it happens. I mean, it absolutely will happen. And that's not the company to do that. Like that's really what I would tell you first and foremost, is don't get discouraged.
You really only need one job. I mean,
right, exactly. And so there is rejection. You're going to hear it. I call candidates if they've interviewed with my leaders and I tell them they're not getting the job. And I try to treat it like what I call warm hug, in terms of, hey, this is a tough conversation to have. And not every company does that. You know, I was talking to a candidate yesterday who said how many companies have ghosted her. She's made it all through the interviews and never heard back anything. And so there are companies like that, and that's unfortunate, but I would say that's not the company for you then. You want to, if you think about the culture of an organization you're joining, it's just as important to have a company who is going to support you personally and professionally.
If you're going to go spend 8 hours a day at a place or work for somebody for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, you want to make sure it's someplace you can tolerate being.
Yeah, and that you're going to feel appreciated in some capacity. Have to be a long-term job, but I do think that's important. But I also believe that if you're out there looking and you're looking for a while and you're not making any traction, then you need to look at the effort that you're putting in terms of, and are you spending it in the right places?
Okay. And then let's say, everything goes great and, you hear 100 rejections, but then you get that one offer and you've landed that job. So how do you negotiate salary, benefits? How do you want to approach that kind of a conversation?
So a great recruiter will have already had that conversation with you. You would have been prepared for what to expect and known, like, hey, this is the range, here's about where I would be coming in. That doesn't always happen. And so as you get to that final interview, and maybe it's not with the recruiter, you're going to meet the partner, I think it's okay to approach it then and just to say, hey, one of the things we haven't talked about is, the compensation range for this position. Would you mind having a conversation about it now? So that you're not surprised when you go through all this, you put your efforts and you're super excited about it and you're like, this is an age, or those sorts of things. So I think it is know your value, know where you're willing to go, but also know what the industry standard is. Now, I think it's important, though. I've had some folks, most of them right out of college, who have told me, well, I researched it on Glassdoor and it says it pays this much. And I'm thinking, what's someone for 10 to 15 years of experience? Right. And so how do I gently let you down, in that? And so I think the more open you are, though, with whoever you're recruiting without oversharing is important so that you go in with strong expectations. Now, if you get the offer and it's not what you wanted it to be, it's okay to ask, is there any negotiation on the salary range? And if they say no, what's that one other thing that maybe is important? Is it an extra week of vacation? Is it an extra couple days of vacation? Like, it's okay to say, hey, I was really hoping to see this number. I understand that, that's not what we're able to do. Is there any negotiation on vacation time? Or whatever that other piece of it was.
So that actually, your comment kind of led me to another question so if you're out of the workforce and you're coming back into the workforce, 5-10 years later, whatever it is, should you expect to start at the bottom of the salary range, or should you expect to kind of go in, with somebody with more experience? Is it depend on the job specific, or is it, something how should you kind of approach that and be realistic about it?
I think it's job specific to start with, but I also think the experience that you've had, and as long as you've been doing something in that gap where you were working and you're not working, whether it's the volunteer work and stuff, it's important to know your value too. And so you're probably coming in the middle.
Let's take my wife as the example. She was out of the workforce. Right. She was out of the workforce for 3 years or so, more or less, give or take. Coming back into the workforce as a marketing, professional. Where does she expect to line up? Should she be angling for that job that pays her, where she was when she left, or, has the ball game changed?
Well, I think that's very industry specific. Marketing has changed a lot, but knowing your wife, she's also kept up with what's going on and what those things are. And so I think that is important now. I think it's the type of company that you're going into, right? And so if she wanted to re-enter into a startup, for instance, their budget might not be. And so, at the top end of that range. And so I think it's important to know kind of all of the factors. If you're going into a large company, though, and I would say you're rejoining kind of a very established company that has the budget for it, then I think it's important to ask, to know your value, because while she might have been off for 3 years, there are specific things that she was doing
that haven't changed.
And so that shouldn't be a change.
Okay.
Yeah, the only other thing I guess I would ask, Shasta, and obviously having a son who's in the workforce now and is interviewing in all sorts of places, I always tell him to be careful with the no's, right? It's okay. I tell them, a lot of times a no today is a yes later on down the road when they look back at that resume. Maybe you're in a stack that they're like, I really like this candidate. They're not right for this spot, but they're right for something else. But depending on how you take that no, can absolutely close doors forever for you. So is that something that as a recruiter you would say absolutely they should be paying attention to and kind of trying to build on no's even if they get them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said, I try to make my rejections a one hug. And you can tell, if I was upset about having to deliver it, but how they handled it was pretty atrocious. I'm like, well, I think
made the
right one. But there are those ones who, how can I improve? What can I do? Can you give me feedback? If I see something else, it's those ones that I stay connected to. And, I rejected him times, but I really liked him. And he was willing to grow, and so we ended up hiring him on the 5th time, and that was a 4-year journey to get him into our company. And so I do think it's important, and I think it comes back to the thing of vulnerability, and it's not oversharing. It's really saying, what is it? What would it have taken to put me at the top? What do I need? Type of thing. And also then using that recruiter as a connection. So I might not have hired somebody, but I really believed in them. I know a ton of people in the area. I'm connected to them. And so how can I help that person then? And on those special cases where I'm really building a strong connection, I'll do it.
So let's talk a little bit about personal stories. So I know you have a really good, a good success story, a warm fuzzy for everybody. So tell us about that.
I can. And then I do want to, before we go, talk about interviews.
Absolutely.
So,
yes, definitely. Let's do that now then. Okay. Let's talk interviews.
So you worked really hard, you used your network, you finally, got the interview, and then you didn't prepare. That's your one shot, as you get in there. And so that's the one thing I would say, practice. Everyone needs an elevator speech. I can guarantee almost every recruiter hiring manager is going to say, tell me about yourself in some form or capacity. And I can't tell you how many times people bobble that.
And by elevator speech, you mean be able to tell somebody all about yourself and the amount of time it goes to go from the 10th floor to the first floor, right?
I don't mean 20 minutes later, but I do mean, take 2 to 5 minutes in practice and make sure you say that. But make sure you don't some people are sick. And also some people reading from a piece of paper, their elevator speech. And so, use voice inflection, bring out your personality, smile when you're talking, especially if it's over the phone. I will try to elevate my energy if I'm talking to someone who's really flat, and I can tell sometimes it's because they're nervous. So practice on, 10 people before you get to that interview. And then think about the normal questions they would ask. Again, with your friends, but what are you good at? What do you want to do? Why do you want this job? Tell me about something that you're really proud of.
When you're doing like a video interview, does it help to adjust the camera and give yourself a more flattering, profile?
Work on the lighting.
So pull up Zoom ahead of time. Understand what type of attire needs to be worn. Smile, make eye contact as much as you can. And so, at the end of the day, the best advice I give anyone who's interviewing with our company is just be yourself. It's very obvious. And, if you didn't get the job and you were 100% yourself, then you have nothing to be ashamed of. But if you went in and you followed it because you were trying to answer the questions the way that you thought they wanted to, or you weren't the person that you are at home in the interview, that's also very obvious. And I think it's important to know that, that level of vulnerability is okay. We as recruiters are normal people. We as hiring managers are normal people. And we're all kind of in this crazy COVID situation together. And so compiling what you're going through, I think even makes the tug on the heartstrings. So if I could go a step further to try to help an individual like that, I know I would, and I believe other people would too.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some personal success stories. Let's hear about the good stuff.
So one of the things I was telling Bryan before we got here is my sister's husband was in a very high-ranking position, and they made the decision for her to stay home. They had 2 kids and 3 during that time when she stayed home, and she was off for 5 to 6 years during that time, and she left a very high-paying, very crazy, professional career as a project manager for a very well-known company. And he unfortunately lost his job. And so they were both trying to figure out how to make ends work. And they made the decision that she was going back. Well, she'd been off for, almost 6 years at the time. But I can tell you during that time, she was PTO president multiple times. She had planned, she was treasurer, she was secretary, all of those things. So she still had some sort of involvement in the community. And I'll tell you how she got the job, and I'll tell you how all of my other friends have gotten it that I've tried to help through this. It's all about who they knew. So she was looking to re-enter. She was very vulnerable with her story, with the people she knew in her network. And again, don't overshare. But here's what's going on. Here's what I'm looking for. And it was her old boss in her company before who forwarded a resume that said, hey, we might have an opportunity, who got her the interview, who then got her the job at the same rate of pay she left in a very competitive environment. And she's doing amazing. She's been there for over a year, but that's happened more than once. And, I just helped one of my son's coaches, with his career. And again, it's about who you knew. And my husband happened to know the head of the region for the company that he applied for, and just sent a quick email. Hey, I know this kid. I know what he's capable of. He's a hard worker. He might not have all the experience you're looking for, but give him a shot. And they did, and he got hired. And so it really is being able to make those personal connections. People are willing to go out on a limb for you, and companies are willing to take a risk in terms of they might not have all the experience we're looking for. If we're talking to this candidate and we're talking to this candidate, if somebody knows them or knows of them and can speak to their character, sometimes that is more than life.
All right. Awesome.
Great advice.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really, really appreciate it. I know Sam really appreciates it too, but I won't speak for him.
No, absolutely, Shasta. Your insights are fantastic. I think it'll benefit a lot of people who are in that situation. So really appreciate you coming on.
Well.
Last story. I have one more.
Absolutely.
This one, I do not know this person, but we know we talked about LinkedIn. When you get to LinkedIn, you start making connections, and you build your connections, and very quickly you can have over 1,000 connections. So when someone accepts yours, you can then,
go onto theirs and blah, blah, blah.
And so when you're looking for a job, find the recruiter of that company, find the hiring manager of that company, send them a note. But I recently, on LinkedIn, was reading through my feed, and I don't know this individual, but I read her story. And again, she was vulnerable about the work she had. She'd been laid off due to COVID. Some of these things happened. Here's what she was looking for. Here's some of the interviews she had, and it just wasn't going her way. And she posted that, and it was a very vulnerable post without oversharing. And the next day I pulled it up and had over 1,000 hits and comments about, go to this link, reach out to my friend, call me, I'm going to send you a message. And so I do think it is about, we're all individuals, and the more that you're willing to kind of be open and vulnerable and here's what I need and here's what I'm looking for, the more people are willing to help.
Awesome.
So there you go.
That's great information.
Advice.
I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. I know a lot of people are going to benefit from this, so thank you so much. Sam, we good? You got anything else?
No, brother. I just want you guys to stay safe, stay dry.
Awesome. Well, have a great weekend. Thank you for coming in, and we will see you guys next time.
All right.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the Top Texas Lawyers podcast. If you would like a consultation with either Bryan or Sam, please call 1-888-981-7509 or visit us on the web at astxlegal.com. Once again, that's astxlegal.com. Thank you very much.